Welcome to the Beautiful Myth channel, where we begin today's story. We hope you enjoy it. My husband's mistress broke into the villa where I lived with him. She pulled out all my fingernails, scratched my face, and even broke both my legs. Cowering in a ball, I begged my husband for help, but all I got was a cold rebuke. Een saved my life, so just let her have her way. The phone was hung up, and Shanine triumphantly locked me and my daughter in the basement. 3 days later, my daughter and I both died of dehydration. When my husband learned the truth, he wept at my grave and begged for my forgiveness. For it was I who had saved his life. I had just bathed my daughter and she was nestled in my arms, cooing and babbling. I happily held my daughter in my arms and coaxed her to take a nap. My husband, Gu Mingchen, sent a WeChat message saying he was going abroad for a few days for a meeting. I turned off my phone and ignored it, but there was a commotion outside the window. Today, I really want to see what kind of woman Mingchen Gu has to monopolize. She's really shameless. Een, let's go back, after all, she is the main woman. Phew, what's the difference between the main wife and the concubine? The one who isn't loved is the concubine. Mingchen Gu doesn't love her at all. I frowned as I listened to the loud voices outside. That woman called Een, I know, is Shanine. Recently, she has gone from being an 18th tier actress to a top tier actress. I just don't know how she did it. I looked out the window, and Shanine had already led a group of friends and bodyguards menacingly into the villa. Fortunately, the room door was locked, and I frowned as I started to call Gu Mingchen. Hello, the number you dialed has been disconnected, said the cold female voice on the phone. I hung up and was about to dial 110 when the door was kicked open. Shanine rushed in front of me and punched me hard in the face. It's you who has been occupying my husband and refusing to divorce him, isn't it? Dazed by the slap, I held my daughter tightly in my arms. I weakly reminded her. You've had your revenge, now go, or Gu Mingchen won't let you go. I am not threatening her. My husband, Gu Mingchen, is the richest man in Beijing, and the Gu Group owns half the entertainment industry. In the past, some women who wanted to sleep with him found their way to the family and threatened me. When Gu Mingchen found out, he flew into a rage and directly ordered his bodyguards to bring the woman to me to kowtow and apologize. His methods have always been ruthless, and he directly made the woman disappear, never to be seen again. I know he doesn't really care whether I'm angry or not, but he can't let his reputation be tarnished. Daring to provoke his wife in her own home is like stepping on Gu Mingchen's face. Who knew that? After hearing my words, Shanine burst out laughing. She rolled up her sleeves, gathered her strength, and slapped me twice. Sister Een is dominant. She is worthy to be President Gu's wife. This woman is so stupid, she can't possibly not know that Mr. Gu would give his heart to Een right now. Shanine looked down at me condescendingly, her eyes full of smugness. Everyone knows that I'm Mingchen's favorite now, how could he make me unhappy for you? I was stunned. It seems that Gu Mingchen really is very special to Shanine. He has always only allowed others to call him Mr. Gu. Even I could only call him Mingchen after I got pregnant. Shanine had used all her strength to slap me, and my head was throbbing. Holding my daughter in my arms, I took a step back and smiled bitterly. Do you think if I divorce him, he'll marry you? And if he's ready, we can always divorce. After all, this marriage has always been my unilateral wish. Shanine heard what I said, her face was full of anger, and her eyes looked at me as if they were about to spit fire. She rushed over and grabbed my hair, shouting angrily. What are you doing here? Mingchen has already told me everything. As soon as he mentioned divorce, you threatened him with your daughter and wouldn't let go. Xinyan's friends behind her were not far behind, and they rushed to my side and began to grab my daughter from my arms. When Xinyan saw me holding my daughter, she sneered and kicked me in the stomach. She was wearing 4-inch heels, and I was immediately knocked to the ground, sweating profusely. My friends took Anan from my arms as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Anan was crying from fear, and I was white as a sheet, begging on the ground. "Don't touch my daughter, you can do whatever you want." I was filled with despair as I looked at the dozen black bodyguards Xinyan had brought with her. The villa was built halfway up a mountainside and was usually very quiet, with only me, Anan and a few nannies living there. Coincidentally, one of the nanny's daughters was getting married today, so I gave them the day off to go to the wedding. I didn't think anyone would hear me if I screamed for help. Xinyan looked at me with a playful tone. "Since you said you'll do whatever I say, kneel down and apologize to me first." My best friend laughed and said, "Een, you're too kind. You should make him admit if he's a good person while he's kneeling." Exactly, who let her know no good, dare to compete with Sister Een for a man. These people, each with sharp words and ruthless glances, looked as if they wanted to tear me apart. The humiliation of kowtowing was nothing compared to the safety of my daughter. Without hesitation, I knelt down and began to kowtow. Xinyan looked at me with glee and sneered, "Kowtowing so quickly, you really have no shame." She looked up and happened to see the photo hanging on the wall of our family of 3. Xinyan was furious, picked up her bag and threw it at me, then said to her bodyguard, "Hold this person down for me, I want to pull out her fingernails one by one." Several black-clad bodyguards immediately gathered behind her and pinned me to the ground. She pulled out a small knife with a smile in her eyes. "It hurts my heart to see these photos. Since everyone says that the 10 fingers are connected, you should experience this feeling." I struggled desperately, but I couldn't escape. The knife landed on my fingertips and struck hard. "Ah!" I screamed in agony, shaking all over, my eyes rolling back in pain. The excruciating pain spread from my fingertips to my heart, and I wished I could die right then and there. Xinyan was very pleased with my reaction and smiled as she held the knife to my index finger. Warm liquid gushed out of my fingertips and I convulsed in pain and collapsed to the ground. 1, 2, 10. She only stopped when my hands were covered in blood and flesh and all 10 fingernails were torn off. She looked at my pale face and felt a twist in her heart. She used the knife to cut my face. She laughed and slapped my face until she had carved the word slave into my face. "After the divorce goes smoothly, you can come and be my and Mingchen's slave. After all, you have been licking Mingchen for so many years, so you are qualified to be a servant to serve both of us." My hands trembled uncontrollably, and a sheet of blood oozed from my face, making me look like a demon crawling out of hell. Before I married Gu Mingchen, I was also a precious treasure that the Jiang family had carefully nurtured, so how could I endure such humiliation? I fell to the ground, powerless, like a pile of rotten mud. But I saw Xinyan's hand reaching for Anan, her face full of a smile. I endured the pain and used all my strength to stand up and pull Xinyan's skirt. Don't touch Anan, you can hit me, you can hit me." Xinyan kicked me away in disgust and stomped hard on the back of my hand with the heel of her high heels, her tone of voice full of hatred. "You deserve to touch me? Take your dirty hands away, they're covered in blood, it's disgusting." I was in so much pain that I lost my voice and all I could make out was the throaty sound of ho ho ho. I almost fainted. As I looked at my soft and cute daughter, my vision blurred and I begged for mercy. Anan is at least Gu Mingchen's only child. If you hurt Anan, Gu Mingchen will be really angry. Xinyan laughed and gently stroked her belly with her hand, taunting me. "I'm already pregnant with Mingchen's son. He won't care about me." I felt cold all over, as if I had fallen into an ice cave. It turned out that Gu Mingchen had indeed betrayed me. At that moment, I hated Gu Mingchen very much. Maybe I should not have saved him 10 years ago. 10 years ago, Gu Mingchen had a car accident. The car caught fire, and smoke billowed out. None of the bystanders dared to go over. Through the smoke I saw Gu Mingchen, who was unconscious inside, gritting his teeth and rushing into the sea of flames. I pulled him out with all my strength and pushed him out just before the car exploded. I have had an ugly scar on my lower back ever since. Gu Mingchen was taken to the hospital, and I was taken back to the Jiang family for treatment. When we met again at the wedding, Gu Mingchen didn't recognize me and spoke in a cold tone. Our relationship is nothing more than a marriage of convenience, so don't expect me to love you. I swallowed the words of recognition, not wanting him to feel that I was threatening him with a life-saving favor. Until I gave birth to Anan, my life was filled with Anan, and I never mentioned that incident to him. But now Shanine is standing in front of me, humiliating me and causing me unbearable pain. And hurting my daughter. At this moment, I hate Gu Mingchen and Shanine so much. Shanine pinched Anan's face with her fingernails, which were stained red with my blood, and her eyes were full of resentment. Buzz. The phone below me vibrated and the name Gu Mingchen flashed on the caller ID. Perhaps it was the power of motherly love that exploded, and I broke free from the bodyguard and pressed the answer button. I shouted heartrendingly into the phone, Gu Mingchen, help us, Shanine, she. Gu Mingchen cut me off, his tone impatient. You have to call me for such a trivial matter? Jiang Yun, you really are sick. Een saved my life. If she makes you unhappy, just bear with it. After all, she is young, so don't hold it against her. Okay, I have things to do, so I'm going to hang up now. I shook my head desperately, tears streaming down my face as the bodyguard behind me covered my mouth and pulled me aside. Shanine smiled as she turned off her phone, and when she looked back at me, she was full of smugness. Now that Mingchen has spoken, I have to think about what to do with you. Her group of friends around her chimed in with ideas. I think this woman still has a lot of charm left. Why don't we let those bodyguards enjoy her? You're so bad. What will happen to General Manager Gu's head if it turns green like this? I collapsed on the ground with a pale face, my body aching, and my heart aching as well. It wasn't until these people had laughed enough that Shanine looked at me with cold eyes. Forget it, just break her legs and throw her in the cellar. When she's hungry and thirsty, let's see if she'll eat her own excrement. Shanine didn't dare to kill me after all. But she was smart enough to know that Gu Mingchen had a deep-seated fear of germs, and if she saw me like this, she would definitely divorce me. The bodyguards received their orders and smashed their clubs into my legs. With just one blow, I rolled over in pain, unable to say a word as my lips trembled. It hurts so much. My mouth is full of blood and I try my best to slow down my tone as I try to calm Anan, who is crying. It's okay, Anan. Close your eyes, don't look at mommy. The cane hits my leg again with a heavy thud. The intense pain hits my nerves and I pass out from the excruciating pain. When I wake up, Anan is crying her heart out in my arms. I hold her despite the pain all over my body. It was dark and empty. I was desperate. This was the basement of the mansion. Shanine had really locked us in there. Mommy, I'm scared. I patted Anan's back and tried my best to calm her down. My voice was choked with sobs. It's okay, Anan, Daddy will be back soon and he'll let us out. Outside the door was Shinyin's mocking laughter. You dare to steal my husband? You'll have a lot to think about. I crawled to the door and burst out with a fierce desire to survive. I kept hitting the basement door with my bloody palms, begging, "Shanine, at least let my daughter go out, she's still so young. I would do anything to keep my daughter alive. She was my only treasure." Shanyine's voice was eerie, like an evil spirit crawling out of the ground. "Anyway, Mingchen and my child are about to be born. As for your daughter, whether she can survive is up to fate." The sound of footsteps gradually faded away, leaving only the two of us in the dark cellar. Anan sobbed as she walked over to me and clung to my arm. "Mommy, I'm scared. I miss Daddy. When will he come and save us?" All I could do was breathe. It was pitch black in the basement, and Anan and I hadn't had a drop of water for days. Until Anan's face turned pale and she snuggled into my arms, too weak to cry. She was still very obedient, her eyelashes fluttering as she asked, "Mama, am I going to die?" I was choking on my tears and unable to make a sound, so I could only stroke her hair, hoping that Gu Mingchen would hurry back to save us. As long as he saved his daughter's life, he could do whatever he wanted. While I was desperately waiting for Gu Mingchen, he took the first flight back to the country. As soon as he got off the plane, he rushed back to the mansion. He knew that Shanyine's temper wasn't very good, so he could indulge Shanyine's selfishness a bit. But after all, his daughter was still at home, so Gu Mingchen still cancelled his meeting and hurried back. As soon as he arrived at the front door of the mansion, it was pitch black inside, with not a single light on. Gu Mingchen's heart was pounding, so he quickened his pace and rushed into the courtyard. Just as he was about to push open the door, the phone rang. He took out his phone and saw the words "Enin baby" flashing on the screen. He casually picked up the phone, his expression tender, and Shanyine's voice came from the other end. "Mingchen, I'm sick and feel really bad. When will you come and keep me company?" Her tone was flirtatious, and it made Gu Mingchen's heart soften. He coaxed, "Enin, I'll go home first and come see you right away." Shanine would not take no for an answer on the phone. "No, you must come now, or I will be angry." Shanine hung up the phone. Gu Mingchen looked hesitantly at the villa window. He guessed that Jiang Yun and his daughter were not at home, so he just turned around and got into the car. The car drove off, heading for Shanyine's house. My daughter and I were struggling to survive in the basement. He knocked on the door, and it opened immediately. Shanine was dressed in red lingerie and looked exceptionally charming. She smiled and threw herself into Gu Mingchen's arms, cooing, "Mingchen, I've missed you so much." Gu Mingchen's eyes darkened as he leaned forward to kiss Shanine. By this time, Anan had already begun to dehydrate and her consciousness was becoming unclear. I prayed to the gods and Buddhas in the cellar, but there was no sign of life. As Gu Mingchen carried Shanine to the bed and began to tear off her clothes, I drove my fingernails into the ground with all my might. My wounds opened and fresh blood flowed out. As Shanine giggled and pushed Gu Mingchen away, she took out the pregnancy test report with a happy face. I endured the excruciating pain and held my trembling fingertips to Anan's lips. When Gu Mingchen was shocked, he read the report and excitedly hugged Shanine. I became inflamed and dehydrated, and my body gradually grew cold. At that moment, Shanine passionately confessed her love to Gu Mingchen. "Mingchen, the right thing I've ever done in my life was to save you in that car accident. Now we're going to have a baby. I'm so happy." Gu Mingchen was touched and gently patted Shanyine's back. "Thank you for saving me, I love you so much." In the cellar, maybe it was the return of my last rays of light, or maybe it was hatred that kept me going. With my bloody fingertips, I left several lines of blood on the wall, which was also my suicide note. I said that if I had not saved Gu Mingchen 10 years ago, I would not have been burned and lost a piece of flesh. I said that I shouldn't have married Gu Mingchen, that he was a heartless person who didn't deserve to be loved. I said that if I could become a vengeful spirit, I would curse Shan'in and Gu Mingchen day and night. In the last line, I wrote, I hope Anan can survive, and I love you, Mom. Even if you drink all my blood, try to survive, Anan. I don't know if heaven answered my prayers. After I died, I floated in the air and watched Gu Mingchen and Shan'in make love. When the feelings were strong, Shan'in asked him, when are you going to marry me? You won't let our child be nameless and without status, will you? Gu Mingchen hesitated for a moment. He gently said, we can't get a divorce yet. The Jiang family has just gone bankrupt, and people will say that our Gu family is taking advantage of them. Shan'in relentlessly slapped him a few times, her face full of complaints. All excuses. I think you just can't bear to let go of this Jiang Yun. Gu Mingchen was a little dazed when he heard Jiang Yun's name out of the blue. Actually, Jiang Yun was a good wife. After they got married, she took care of him almost meticulously. Although he sometimes got bored and lost his temper with Jiang Yun, she never complained and was extremely obedient. His friends all envied him for having such a good wife. What did he say back then? She's like a dead fish in bed, it's no fun at all. In fact, Gu Mingchen was a little sorry after he said that. I was floating in the air, listening to Gu Mingchen's thoughts, and the corners of my mouth turned up. So that's what happened. That day, he brought me a bunch of roses and made amends with a guilty heart. I gave in to his tenderness that day and was overjoyed. It was just a fleeting feeling of guilt after doing something wrong, but it made me happy for a long time. It was also the night we had an in. I closed my eyes and tears streamed down my cheeks. In front of me, Gu Mingchen was hugging Shan'in. How could I not miss her? In, you saved my life, and you are the only one I love at this moment. I felt sick watching this scene. Gu Mingchen's love was really cheap. Does he love the one who saves him? Unfortunately, his real savior died in the dark and cold cellar. He died with one eye open. Gu Mingchen stayed with Shan'in for 2 days, and I watched from the sidelines for 2 days. He cooked and washed for Shan'in and took care of her in every way. After being married for so many years, I never knew that Gu Mingchen could cook. I snorted. Gu Mingchen asked intentionally or unintentionally, by the way, that day Jiang Yun called me, and you went to see her. Shan'in's movements stopped and a trace of guilt flashed across her face. Then she replied with justification, I didn't do anything to her, she kept screaming that I was bullying her. After hearing Shan'in's very obvious lie, Gu Mingchen still decided to believe it. His tone was calm. No wonder Jiang Yun hasn't answered my messages for a few days, she must be sulking with me. He helplessly scratched Shan'in's nose and laughed, troublemaker, you're going to get me into trouble. Shan'in chuckled and hugged his arm. This is not trouble, this is for our child. Gu Mingchen's eyes were a little confused, and then they were hidden again. He said blankly, wait a little longer, In. I will divorce Jiang Yun. Unfortunately, the marriage could not be dissolved. My body is probably already decomposing in the cellar. I just don't know how Anan is doing. I'm worried, but there's nothing I can do. Gu Mingchen and I seemed to have some kind of bond that kept my soul from leaving his side. I was forced to watch him flirt with Shan'in every day. I began to look forward to the day when he would see my body and those last words. How would he feel when he realized that I was the one who saved his life? After Shan'in fell asleep, Gu Mingchen quietly walked into the living room with the phone in his hand. He kept calling me in the dark. Hello, the number you dialed has been disconnected. Hello, the number you have dialed is not in service. Hello, the number you have dialed is no longer in service. Gu Mingchen continued to dial for more than 10 times, and finally, with an angry face, he threw the phone away. He thought that this woman, Jiang Yun, really doesn't know how to behave. I saw Gu Mingchen sitting on the sofa with a dark face. Hey, Jiang Yun, where have you been? Let me tell you, you can't just stay at home with your daughter. His words were cut off by the police. Mr. Gu, we found the bodies of your wife and daughter in the basement of the West Hills mansion. Please come and identify them as soon as possible. Gu Mingchen froze, struggling to understand the meaning of these words. My wife and daughter. Jiang Yun is dead. Anan is also dead. Gu Mingchen sneered. Jiang Yun deliberately found you to make up this lie to spite me, right? Is that interesting? Put Jiang Yun on the phone and tell her to stop making a fool of herself. I sighed. Gu Mingchen was still so arrogant and stupid, only fooling himself. The policeman on the phone also sighed. Mr. Gu, I can understand how you feel right now, but what I said is true. We are currently at the villa in the west of the city, please come quickly. The phone hung up, and Gu Mingchen was full of disbelief. He stood up in a daze, grabbed the car keys, and rushed downstairs. Gu Mingchen's hands were shaking uncontrollably, and it took him several attempts to successfully unlock the car door. It was an hour's drive from the city to the mansion in the west of the city. Gu Mingchen drove at 200 kilometers per hour the whole way, and it took him only 15 minutes to arrive. The courtyard was full of police cars, and the red and blue lights hit Gu Mingchen's pale face. Everyone in the courtyard was casting sympathetic glances at him. Gu Mingchen rushed into the cellar. When he saw the two bodies covered with white cloth, his legs gave way and he fell to his knees. I followed Gu Mingchen, and when I saw the two bodies on the ground, my eyes welled up with tears. Anan had not survived after all. It was my inadequacy as a mother that had failed to protect her. The tears fell drop by drop. Gu Mingchen crawled over to my body, his hands shaking as he tried to lift the white sheet. But he failed several times. His voice choked with sobs. It wasn't you, was it, Jiang Yun? I stood by with hatred in my eyes, watching him weep bitterly. Until he saw the pale, stiff bodies of Anan and me, and my body covered in bruises. Gu Mingchen knelt on the ground and banged his head against us repeatedly. The policeman helped him up and spoke with compassion. Mr. Gu, we know you're very sad, but the most important thing right now is to find the killer. Look up. Ms. Jiang left a bloody note before she died, mentioning the name Shanine. Do you know her? Gu Mingchen suddenly raised his head, his eyes fixed on the bloody words on the wall. He read each word carefully, but vomited blood from his throat. Gu Mingchen covered his mouth with his hand, and blood oozed from his palm. His mouth was scarlet red, as if he was an evil spirit crawling out of hell. His tone was fierce. Shanine, I'll kill you. I'll kill you. Then he fainted on the spot, his eyes rolling as his heart gave out. I watched him suffer and feel the pain, and my heart was at peace. Now that he knows the pain, why didn't he do it before? Not only did Shanine deserve to die, but so did Gu Mingchen. Gu Mingchen was quickly taken to the hospital, and when he woke up, his assistant arrived with a stack of documents. Assistant Li looked at Gu Mingchen's pale face and hesitated. Gu Mingchen looked at him and said hoarsely, "What is it?" I went to the hospital to get Shanyian's medical records, and she was never pregnant. Gu Mingchen coughed violently, his eyes full of hatred. Li continued, "Just now, Ms. Zhang's autopsy report came out, and there was a burn mark on her waist. I checked the medical records from 10 years ago and found that the day she came to the hospital for treatment of her burns happened to be the day you had the car accident." Li's voice became weaker and weaker. For Gu Mingchen had already turned pale. He mumbled dazedly, "It really was Jiang Yun who saved me. She is my savior. Gu Mingchen clutched his head in pain, his eyes full of remorse. I killed her, it's all my fault, it's all my fault. Tears flowed from Gu Mingchen's eyes, and he was in extreme pain. I floated in the air with no expression and watched as he kept hitting himself with his hands. His thoughts were deafening. Of course, Jiang Yun and I could have been happy for the rest of our lives, with a harmonious relationship and a beautiful daughter. It's all Shen fault, kill her, kill her. Li had received many favors from me before, so he felt sorry for me at this time. He looked at the irritated Gu Mingchen and added the last part of the sentence. According to the coroner, Ms. Jiang was inhumanely mistreated and suffered injuries before she was locked in the basement and left to die of thirst. Before she died, she even fed on her own blood. As soon as he finished speaking, Gu Mingchen got up barefoot and rushed out. I followed him and saw him find Shenyin in a hotel. With tears streaming down her face, Shenyin panicked and threw herself into his arms. Mingchen, I didn't mean to kill her. The police are looking for me everywhere, what should I do? She looked at Gu Mingchen with hope in her eyes, hoping that he could help her solve this problem. However, she didn't notice that Gu Mingchen was full of resentment at the moment, and quietly picked up the fruit knife on the table. His tone was soft, what else can I do, of course it's. Gu Mingchen lifted the knife and plunged it into Shenyin's body. Shenyin trembled all over and was held tightly in Gu Mingchen's arms, unable to break free. Of course I will make her pay for her life. Blood spilled out, staining Gu Mingchen's palm red. He quickly pulled out the knife and stabbed her again. Is this how you tortured her? Gu Mingchen's tone was gentle, but the way he stabbed the knife into Shenyin's body, one after the other, was eerie. Shenyin's eyes widened in disbelief. Gu Mingchen, you want to kill me. I saved your life, how could you? It was better not to mention this, but as soon as he mentioned it, Gu Mingchen went even crazier. He stabbed Shenyin 32 times in a row. Finally, he ripped out Shenyin's fingernails one by one. Just as Shenyin collapsed to the ground and died, Gu Mingchen picked up the stool and smashed it against her legs with all his might. Gu Mingchen's tears fell as Shenyin uttered her last cry. Jiang Yun must have been in so much pain back then. Antonin, I'm sorry to her, I'm not a good father. I looked at Shenyin, who was dead with her eyes wide open, covered in a pool of bright red blood. She was lying on the ground, her face still in disbelief. It seemed like she couldn't figure out why Gu Mingchen had suddenly gone crazy. Gu Mingchen threw down the knife and sat on the ground, exhausted. His eyes were bloodshot and tears were streaming down his face. He curled up on the ground and mumbled, Jiang Yun, Anan, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I was wrong, so wrong. I will die now to atone for my mistakes. I hope we can still be a family in the afterlife. Until then, I will definitely make it up to you, Jiang Yun and Anan. Gu Mingchen raised the knife and was about to plunge it into his own body when the police broke down the door. They saw Shenyin's body on the ground and Gu Mingchen looking insane, and rushed over to subdue him. It was a clear case of intentional homicide. When Gu Mingchen was taken away by the police, the shackles seemed to disappear. I stood still and watched as Anan walked toward me step by step. Mom, Anan has finally found you. Tears rolled down my face as I picked Anan up and kissed her on the cheek. My love, you worked hard.